I'm here with Marty Johnstone at RF Code. Marty is a product manager at RF Code and has been on both the operation side and the solution side of data centers. And Marty, welcome. It's great to talk with you here.
Yeah, great to be here, Andy. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, I guess to start, tell me, what is the difference between asset tracking and asset management?
Thanks, Andy. That's a great question. And, I think it's one that seems very simple on the surface, right? Asset tracking is really the nuts and bolts, the ones and zeros of how you are looking at an asset. Do I know where it's at? Is it where I think it is? Can I verify that? And the management of that is really a little bit more detailed, right? So we go into how are we finding efficiencies? Are we able to utilize the assets that we own effectively? Are we bringing them into the data center effectively? Are we saying that as it goes from the storage room into the data hall, back out for decommission, are we keeping that as tightly as we can to make sure that we're using the asset as effectively as we can?
Great. And tell me a little bit about your background and your experience, both on the operational side and also on the solution side.
I started out as a project manager for the CME group. And so I was there helping with their asset management solution. And we got in through basically trying to figure out are we effective? Are we efficient? And are we able to utilize, again, these assets that we own? And are we able to conduct an audit, right? Are we able to say, yes, we absolutely know where these assets are? So I went from, the front lines of that to then coming over, and I was a sales engineer with RF Code for about 5 years. So I was on the pre-sales side, working with all of our clients and all of our customers to find out how do we take the solution that we have here at RF Code and make that relevant for many of our customers, right? So taking their problems that they have in different business challenges that they are having and making sure that we're getting the right solution to them to make them also more effective and more efficient.
And so being on the operational side, intimately, and especially as a sales engineer, intimately what some of their challenges are. What are some of the reasons that a data center manager or engineer would seek an asset tracking solution?
So this is always a great question of where do you start, right? What's the first point that brings you to needing a solution? And there's really a couple triggers that kind of stand out to me that I've seen. And one of them is really the first, in which seems most likely, the loss of critical assets. There's typically times that a customer will come to us and say, hey, we've lost X amount of money in actual hardware. And sometimes those numbers are staggering in terms of how much hardware is lost. If you talk to someone outside of a data center that, thinks that they are most effective and most efficiently run, and you say, yeah, I bet you don't think of the fact that you can lose assets. They're not shipped to the right data center. They're not shipped to the right site. You're not confirming that you've received them. So that loss in visibility from the jump essentially is really the starting point. And then the other part of that is really just starting to say, hey, I have an asset management problem. And, you start to look at easy things to fix. Everyone thinks, or there's very frequently, it's thought that, well, I could fix it with a process. I can easily make my engineers, make my team fix something with a process. And while that works some of the time, right, we always know that that's not the solution to the problem, and that sometimes it takes more technology than it does resource at that point.
That makes a lot of sense. And in asset tracking, is 100% accuracy for asset tracking even achievable?
Yeah, this is a great question, Eddie. So this comes up a lot, right? A lot of our customers will ask, I need to be 100%. And that's always the goal. And we absolutely think that it's achievable. I will always say it's about 99.998%. I'll always leave a little, I'm an engineer at heart, right? So I will never say it's always definitely 100%, but we can get as close as possible. And I think it is very much achievable. The assets that are tracking, that are coming in, we have to really look at, do we have the right resources in play? Is that people, process, technology? Are we putting that all together? And the more mind-blowing part that I think about is that 85% is an industry standard. And when you think about that from a number standpoint, you see 85%, and well, that looks really good, right? If a baseball hitter hit 850, we would think that, they'd be in every single record book around. However, this is assets we're talking about, and 85% means we're missing 15%. And so if we think about it, a very simple explanation I've usually used is if we have 1,000 assets, that means we have 150 of them. We don't know where they are if we're 85%. And it's not about the device itself, right? Servers and network switches and things are relatively cheap in the grand scheme of technology, but it's what else is on all of those devices, right? So what if you're a banking client and you have a lot of customer data and sensitive data that's on there? Not only are you taking the money that you lost for the actual hardware, but now you're going to be in the news. You're going to be all over, and that's going to really critically cost your company revenue.
That's a great lead into my next question, which is who in the data center is most affected when asset management isn't 100%?
Who's most affected with asset management goes awry and not 100%? It's really everyone. From the data center standpoint, though, that really starts to fall down. Everything kind of rolls downhill, if you will, right? And it's the people on the front lines. It's the engineers. It's the managers. It's the people who are responsible for purchasing those assets that are really starting to get affected by that. And I've seen this a lot with some of the clients and my own experience where the engineers essentially become the team that's the stopgap there. They're the ones in the data hall now looking for assets, trying to say yes or no on if they can reconcile them, if they can see that they're there. And what I've even found is that throughout that process, because no one tries to make a mistake, right? Everyone wants to be 100%, but this is human error we're introducing to the process. So what ends up happening is you start to create this tension amongst the teams as well, right? So this is something I feel that is not very tangible cost you can associate to it. However, it does really affect the performance of your team at that point. And are we saying that the engineering staff can go in and now search for assets? Effectively, we're becoming an accountant team, right? Or some other sort of asset tracking management team. And that's, we need to get them back to their true task, which is engineering, right? Putting in the servers, routing network switches, running cable, those sorts of tasks. And that starts to really consume time. And again, brings that tension of, okay, well, I'm not getting my main job responsibility done. And now I'm focused on this other part.
So what are the options to get 100% accurate asset management? Talk to me a little bit about active versus passive versus barcode solutions.
Obviously, we've known my stake on this, which is it's not completely process based. And with that being said, right, barcodes and passive RFID technology is really good in a process-based system, right? There's still manual interaction. There's still things that you have to do from the engineer all the way up to the financial department and all the staff in between to make sure that asset management program runs effectively with passive and in barcode situations. The example I like to give all the time is if you have a passive tag, and you were to walk through passive tags are very big in department stores, right? It's on clothing, it's on merchandise. If you walk through that portal at the front door and it beeps at you, first thing you're going to do is turn around and say, okay, yeah, you got to take this tag off because I actually bought it, it's mine. How many times does that happen where there's an error because the tag beeps the wrong way, or it doesn't accurately sound an alarm that you've taken something out? People could still steal. You can manipulate those, right? It's very easily done with a solution that is process-based like that and manual. Whereas the active solutions are definitely more based to say, hey, we're going to put all of our resources into the technology. We want that portion to work. And we want it to basically always tell us where it's at, regardless of if it's through a threshold or, triggered by an event that is human based. Again, I have one of the good examples I see all the time with the difference here is I see a lot of customers change over from passive into an active, or a barcode into an active. And what I really see a lot of times there is, we go through one of the processes I like to go through is let's document all your procedures. How does it go from the minute you purchase it all the way through decommission? And then what we do is we start to count where's our pinch points, right? How many times does a human have to interact with that data or that asset to keep it reflected accurately? And we've seen some as much as 20 to 25 times it's touched in the process. Whereas with the active asset tracking, we're looking at 2 touch points, one to get the asset in and one to decommission on the way out. And we can do things to eliminate both of those as well, right? We can make it a very seamless process. So I say all that to say is eliminating those pain points is definitely where we start to really gain into that active situation.
Let's double click on an active solution. Tell me a little bit about what the active solution actually is.
Yeah, so active solution is we are constantly beaconing out, right? So it's not a point in time. It's not a place in time. It is active every minute, every 30 seconds, constantly saying, here I am. And it's based off of the hardware and on the actual device itself. There are real-time solutions. So here's one of the traps that I see a lot, which is real-time versus active, right? You're still in real time, but you could say you're a real-time solution based off of a point-in-time technology in the background, such as passive. Real-time actually means we need everything to be beaconing in and sending a signal right away, every chance it gets, every 30 seconds to a minute. And that is truly what gets us to an active RFID technology, but more importantly, supports the term real time, right? That's a phrase I feel that gets thrown around quite a bit, but while it qualifies for real time, if you're looking at it from a passive solution, you could say, well, I have access in real time. Yes, but the data is stale behind it. So if the data is not actively updated, then we're not in true terms of real time.
So this seems like a no-brainer, really. Why wouldn't everybody be doing this?
Man, I tell you, this is a question that has kept me up at night for 15 years now, right? I seen and I've lived through, and I see it with a lot of our customers, of what is the difficulty that brings them to a poor audit or bad processes. And it's a continuation of wanting to keep going with what are we doing today, and how do we just tweak a process? How do we make it so that we don't really disrupt or disturb our process or our team right now, but we're only going to make small tweaks? And it really takes that to say, hey, we've got, like we mentioned earlier, right? What's the trigger that starts off here? And it's, well, we've lost a whole bunch of stuff. Why wait for that trigger or to fail an audit completely, right? Do a 50 or 60% complete audit, and we've got some real problems to fix, versus kind of proactively saying, hey, we have a process. It's okay. Why not be great? Like, let's step up and go for the actual process and solution that, while maybe it takes us a couple weeks or a month or 2 months to roll this project out, it saves us so much more time down the road, and it's going to really make benefits. And you think about your whole program 2-3 years from there, and it's astonishing. We have a lot of customers. One of the phrases I get a lot of times is like, it just works. I forget that it's there, right? And once you're kind of in it, it's hard to think about what is life prior to having an active solution.
I love that. It sounds like preventative healthcare, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, it really is.
So what prevents a data center manager from acknowledging that they have an asset management problem?
It's also another great question I like, right? Which is, the first I always like to say is, no one likes to call their house dirty. You're not going to bring guests in and say, yep, I got a dirty house. And in life, and in this case as well, you're not going to openly admit and say, you know what, I'm terrible at this. It's really bad. Because when we get, when I work with managers or with staff that get to this point, it is really bad, right? We're talking about process. At some point, they've basically said, listen, we're going to fix this all. So we're just going to stop caring altogether. And that's when you've really gotten to that kind of rock bottom situation, if you will. And so that, the first is just, it's going to be admitting that, yeah, we have to fix this, that there's something we need to do to make this really a long-term solution. The second part is there's the awareness isn't there for some folks, right? Some of our managers and some of the teams that we see just don't really think or know that they have some issues there, or that they could be better at it, right? So some of the clients that we've seen say, hey, I have, I'm 90% accurate, or 93 or 94% accurate. Again, I will still challenge them with, well, at that rate, you still have 6% or 10% that you don't know where it's at. However, it's just an awareness problem of saying that, yeah, I don't even recognize that there's a problem here. I don't even see it yet, right? And from a C-level or C-suite management standpoint, everything looks great. You don't notice that small leak that's happening until it becomes much bigger.
Right. And so what have you done or your customers done to be willing to look at better solutions?
The first part that I like to think about with this is that, at some point you kind of have to put your ego aside and say, you know what, let's fix this. And I say that because it's kind of the inverse to, once you do that, we see a lot of our the customers who do end up bringing the solution to their staff, to their team, they end up becoming kind of the hero in that situation, right? They look, it ends up fixing a problem that like we mentioned earlier, either A, you don't know you have, or B, it's so bad that you're just bleeding out and you need a solution. Usually when you get to the latter part, it's it's all hands on deck trying to scramble and fix. So why not be proactive and look at it from, hey, how do we become the most effective, most efficient we can, and do this from the jump? And one of the things that I would give suggestion to for data center management staff and teams is that look at that process, and does it seem effective to you, right? We're all technology people. We're all constantly thinking about, how do I take this problem and apply technology to it to make it better? And in this case, it's saying, yeah, we have a solution here, an active RFID solution that helps not only track an asset, but we're managing it throughout its life cycle. And then we could say, hey, we're also saving us time, money, resources on the day-to-day operation of that, and gets our team really involved in it. I'll say one of the things that I found very intriguing was, so I had the experience of rolling this solution out, and when we did that, the only time we could do so was on a Saturday. Asking staff to come in, for a 6th day of the week on a Saturday, you typically have to pull teeth to do so, right? Like, that's usually not a thing. Everybody was volunteering to want to come in because they knew and believed that the solution was going to work. And I've seen this now with not only my own experience of being the project manager, but as a sales engineer and helping the teams roll it out. I've seen this many different of our customers, they get excited to want to go do it. And ultimately, that's what you want your team to do. You want to be excited to go fix these problems that are out there, or these, what you may not even be a problem yet, right? We'll go out there and just be proactive. And so I think, looking at it from a customer standpoint of like, how do I get this done? And some advice I would give is to say, put your ego aside, become that hero, and then try to avoid your organization becoming more exposed, right? Try to keep that tipping point out of the way, be proactive, and make sure that we can get something that's scalable in there.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you think about it, most IT professionals are early adopters of technology in the first place. So this seems like a natural fit. And then also, nobody wants to react to a fire drill either in a production work environment. So having a solution like this in place makes a lot of sense.
I will add on to that early adopter comment too, Andy. I think that's a very, very good point. One of the things, though, that we see is the early adoption in technology ends up becoming pushed aside on this part because asset management is to most a secondary function, right? It's one that they're not most focused on. It's, how do I plug my cables in? How do I install these devices? How do I get the network running? It's the ones and zeros of the actual tech. And this is the, how do we manage the tech that's managing the rest of the solution, right? So it's often very overlooked.
Until there's a fire drill.
Until there's a fire drill, right?
So you want to avoid that. Well, this has been a pleasure, Marty. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you here.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. I appreciate it.